There are expensive lenses you buy and regret, but this one you probably should own at this point. And here's why. It's cheap, it's flawed, and it's kind of magical in some cases. This is essentially a crappy copy of Zeiss Biotar 58mm f2, made somewhere by some dude in a basement on a lab, without that much of a quality control. Helios 44 was mass-produced, literally millions exist, multiple iterations as well. They're cheap and still available today, for as cheap as the price of a filter in some cases. It's known for the swirly bokeh and vintage character. After trying multiple copies, before they even became popular and blew up, I think I've tried around 100 of them or so. I was buying this crap on a daily basis, buying and selling and all that stuff, but that's the story for another time. This particular copy stayed in my kit for over a decade at this point. This is Helios 44-3 and this is a domestic version. I won't go into details why I decided to keep this exact copy because I think I've tried them all at this point. Why I kept this one over 44-2 or 44M or even 40-2. I'm gonna be short here and I'm gonna say this instead. The size of this particular lens and the image this particular copy provides, it's more than enough for my needs. I'm not going to focus on the history of this lens or the build quality and stuff like that. Instead, I want to share my experience across different formats. I was fortunate enough to use this lens on the different cameras throughout the years, and that's what I want to focus on today. On some more, on some less, but I think it's enough to showcase what you can achieve and expect from this lens on the different sensor sizes. So let's start with the most interesting and coincidentally the biggest format that I've tried this lens on. And we'll go smaller from here. Oh, and sorry for my film friends, no photos on film unfortunately this time around. Okay, so modern medium format. This lens becomes from 58mm to something close to 45.8, 46mm, so it's a bit wider field of view. Even though I enjoyed my time with Fuji GFX and native lenses, I just had to try something less clinical on that sensor. And luckily, it covers the full image circle surprisingly well. For video, even better because of the 16:9 aspect ratio. Swirl and fall off are exaggerated, and you get pretty unique rendering in my opinion. You can watch my other videos, I don't have that many, and try to spot where I use this lens with the GFX 100S. On the medium format, short answer, it's worth it. On GFX, it becomes something special. Not technically perfect, but somewhat painterly. And that's the point. Next up, full frame. This is where I used this lens the most, originally, back in the day. Had to dig those Canon 5D Mark II files from the archive. This is the native feel of this lens. Bokeh swirls shows beautifully, and you get pretty sharp center with a little bit of a smudge in the corners, pretty much like you see right now in this video. Sometimes a bit busy depending on the light, flares, aberrations, etc. More on that later in pros and cons section of this video. Overall, I think it's a classic vintage look, especially for portraits. Works well on the mirrorless too, by the way. Crop bodies are next, and particularly APS-C. I don't have many examples here because I've enjoyed Fuji lenses way too much at that time, but here comes nothing. Still plenty of character, just a bit tighter field of view, around 87 to 88mm instead of 58. Great for portraits still, and maybe detailed shots. Here's a life hack for you that I forgot to mention before. You can also buy cheap macro extension rings for M42 mount. And this lens becomes somewhat good close-up lens in this case. But just keep in mind that the focusing is going to get even more challenging because of the shallower depth of field. But it's okay-ish close-up lens. And here are some examples that I've used this lens for in some other videos. Most of these were shot on the Fuji GFX and maybe casually on the Fuji XS20 because these were the only cameras I had at that time. So overall a bit less swirl, but still dreamy. And I would say pretty usable. And less the Micro Four Thirds system. Objectively the least interesting application of this lens in my opinion, because you're essentially using just a center portion of the lens, and you're basically cropping off all of that swirly goodness on the sides. Unless you're willing to splurge or already own the speed booster, it becomes really narrow field of view. Here we have to multiply everything by 2, as you may know, so it becomes 116 millimeters. This is definitely not the focal length for everyone. This is more of a detailed shot, maybe textures, or something like that. I mean, what you use the longer focal length for, usually. Not as much swirl as well, unfortunately, but still fun and cheap for vintage glass lovers. Now let's take a look at pros and cons of owning this lens. And let's start with pros first. Number 1, it's dirt cheap. Now, 50 bucks or more or less, depending on the version you're willing to go for. I got mine in 2010 for $1. Here's the inflation for you. Number 2, tons of character, swirly bokeh, vintage rendering, and f2 aperture is actually usable if you get a good copy. And we're shooting on one right now. This is at f2. Number 3, it's built from metal and has a satisfying manual focus feel. No focus by wire. Number 4, works on almost any camera with adapters. And at this point, there's plenty of options to even rehouse this lens for the cinema use or whatever. Really good example, although a bit on the pricey side, is from the iron glass rehousing. As you may already know, these Ukrainian rehoused lenses have been used in productions for the movies like Dune, Batman, and many more at this point. You don't have to go that fancy. And let's be honest, for 50 bucks and for your personal use, it's not necessary. Which brings us to the number 5. It's a unique creative tool, which is not sterile and inspires play, which I think is kind of important when everything around is really clinical and sterile. But not everything is great about this lens, which brings us to cons. Number 1, it is not sharp wide open by the modern day standards. But that's kind of the point. You buy it for that softness and glow. Number 2, strong chromatic aberrations in some cases, and flare for that matter. Flare can be a creative pro, but I wouldn't rely solely on this lens for everything. Here's some example. At f2, Helios is just a flare machine at this point. Also, pay attention to the corners, chromatic aberrations, and I mean everything you expect to be good. With this lens, there is going to be a compromise. Number 3, manual focus only. And you may have noticed that I put this into pros too, but this is not for everyone. It's definitely better with some sort of follow focus system or lighter focusing system as well. But honestly, not too bad if your copy's helicoid is good. Which brings us to the con number 4, sample variation. The quality control in Soviet era was trash and all over the place. Even those first versions claimed to be better quality, they're not even close to something Japanese of the same era. So if you're buying online, definitely ask for the detailed video of everything about the lens. Not just lenses, helicoid and everything. Make sure you ask all the questions and get as much information as possible. At least get a clean copy. Because I own some of them, they were literally falling apart in my hands when I was focusing. This particular copy of mine was fixed twice at this point, and it still leaks oil on the aperture blades. For me, it really doesn't matter because I shoot this lens mostly wide open and I just embrace flaring, but just keep that in mind, the quality control is not there. And number 5, this swirl that we're buying this lens for can be gimmicky and overused. So keep this in your bag, but just don't overdo it for everything. Whether you're on Fuji, Nikon, Canon, Sony, GFX, Micro Four Thirds, you name it, Helios, just like many other vintage lenses, adapts and brings character every time. For 50 bucks or less? That's crazy. Do you own a Helios lens at this point? Or any other bargain vintage lenses? Let me know down in the comments, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.